Amy, we played this bite from former FBI counterterrorism director Terry Turchi the other day about the FBI. He was on Fox and Friends. But I just, in light of what we've learned yesterday
Yes.
about the found texts, thank God they weren't,
Wipes clean.
yeah, like with a cloth or something. Yeah, that didn't happen. They weren't in Sandy Berger's roll top desk. They were found, although we don't know where. So that plus the PR assault the FBI is doing to prevent the release of that Nunez memo on alleged surveillance abuses. And then the New York Times seeming to run interference by dropping this story about Trump allegedly wanting to fire Mueller last June. I just have to go back to what the former FBI counterterrorism director said about FBI failures from Page and Strzok back to Comey, senior leadership.
This is a catastrophic failure. The FBI was failed at the top by the director, the deputy director, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page. Lisa Page, to give you a frame of reference here, was a chief legal counsel in the deputy director's office. That's a big deal. So this didn't just all happen. It wasn't just a series of coincidences. People who've worked major cases in the FBI know that these kinds of things just don't happen unless they're designed to happen this way.
And the upshot?
There's a lot of political dirty tricks going on here. I don't think this trail is going to stop at the door of the Russians. I think it's going to stop where the Democratic Party came through the door of the FBI. And I think this is Watergate Part 2. I think this is Hillary and Bill Clinton Part 2. We put up with all of this and the Clintons during my time in the FBI. And it was one scandal after another.
That phrase that he used, the Democrat Party walked through the front door of the FBI, that's the one that sticks with me. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Bret Baier. Of course, he is Fox News anchor of Special Report, weekdays, 5 p.m. Chicago time, and the author of the book 3 Days in January, Dwight Eisenhower's Final Mission. Bret, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
Morning. So let's take the Devin Nunes memo first and the FBI's efforts, a letter from Assistant Attorney General Stephen Boyd to challenging the basis on which Nunes even wrote the memo, clearly trying to prevent its release. And the FBI, I think it seems to me, in concert with DOJ, trying to prevent the release of this 4-page memo that Nunes authored or had put together with staff. How should we interpret that in light of everything else that's going on at FBI?
Well, I think the memo is interesting because it is a product of the Republicans in the House Intelligence Committee. So naturally, there is a partisan element to it. I think there are facts, as we're being told there, distilled down from thousands of pages of classified material. So they distilled that down to what they see as the most egregious, issues of surveillance and FISA warrants. The Democrats now have done the same thing on the other side of the same classified material, distilling it to their own memo. And so there's a partisan element to that. I think that we haven't seen it, so we can hear what it's characterized to be, and likely that the dossier that was paid for by the Democrats somehow factoring into a FISA warrant application. But that part of it is naturally partisan because of the Republicans running the show. The text messages and the 5 months that we didn't know, and now they're retrieving these text messages, is less partisan and more, in the eyes of some people, more trouble.
Just one follow-up on the memo, though. So the FBI is also complaining about not having been provided a copy of the Nunes memo. Well, that's a bit rich, isn't it, since the FBI has been stonewalling the House, even after Paul Ryan said that he thought he had a sense for the FBI to produce what's been requested for months and months on end. The FBI seeming to, we get what we want, we give what we want, and we're accountable to no one seems to be the attitude, even under Trump appointee Christopher Wray. And I find that a bit troubling, and so does Kim Strassel, and who writes about it in the Wall Street Journal today, and so does Cheryl Atkinson, who writes about it in The Hill.
Yeah, no, it is troubling, and eventually this is all going to come to a head. I think by next week, I'm being told that we're going to see the memo, and the chips will fall where they may. I think that, listen, whatever you think about, the politics of this, there are weird things that have been going on, and the FBI has to explain that and answer questions about it.
Big bombshell dropped last night, or so they say, by the New York Times, that President Trump once tried to fire special counsel Robert Mueller last June, and his attorney was going to resign if he did that, so he didn't do it. Who do you believe? Because Trump has now come out saying that is not true. Consider the source.
Yeah, but he's now also said this morning, I have the authority to fire Mueller. I could fire Mueller anytime I wanted to. I tend to believe that he was considering at least firing Mueller. The fact that he said that this morning.
We're talking about now last June. He's gone from considering firing Mueller to considering sitting down with him and being interviewed under oath. That's a sea change in a short period of time.
Yeah, it is. I think that is an interesting thing, and how that happens and the parameters around which it happens. I think what the president says about it and how his lawyers react to what the president says and kind of calibrate that. There's always like a little fine print that says if my lawyers allow it, or if with the conditions of my lawyers. So I think the president's trying to show that he's ready and willing and able to talk to Mueller, but I do think that the lawyers are not 100% there yet.
Speaking of Trump being ready, willing, and able, how about dealing on DACA? Sort of a surprise for the president to propose potentially a path to citizenship for as many as 1.8 million people that are DACA designees or could have been, in exchange for those things that he outlined in that very public televised roundtable discussion he had a couple of weeks back with respect to chain migration, diversity visa lottery, and border and wall funding. Democrats rejected out of hand. Did he put them in a trick bag by coming over the top with an even bigger number than we've mostly been talking about and demonstrating that he's very reasonable on the topic and all he's asking for is the same thing he's been saying are must-haves from the outset?
I think so. Whenever you do that, whenever you actually talk details about any negotiation, big deal in Washington, it causes quite a stir because people actually have facts about what you want. And here is a president who's now getting a lot of grief, and an administration getting a lot of grief from the right, saying, how dare you, this is awful, this is 1.8 million, this is exactly what we feared, all this stuff. And then from the left saying, there's no way we can accept this, this is not what we bargained for, this is dead on arrival. And so I think this is all part of negotiation. But every time that you put out your marker in Washington, this is what happens.
So State of the Union is on Tuesday. What's your plan? What's Fox's plan to cover it?
I'll be anchoring with Martha McCallum, and it'll be a big night. I mean, there's a lot of things that this president is going to likely lay out. And after the success of the tax law in his eyes, and I think in the economy's eyes, he will tout the way forward. I think infrastructure is probably on his agenda soon. I think redoing Dodd-Frank, the regulations on Wall Street, is probably going to be pushed soon. And the question is whether he can get a Congress that is obviously scared in front of a midterm election to come on.
All right. He is Bret Baier. He is the anchor of Special Report, weekdays, 5 p.m. on Fox News Channel. Author of the book, 3 Days in January, Dwight Eisenhower's Final Mission. Bret, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch.